George Valdes was on top of the world. It was obvious by his lifestyle and the circles he moved in that he was cleaning up. George Valdes had it made.
What happened was October 11th, 1966 at 9 o'clock in the morning. I was just 10 years old. And suddenly, as I'm waiting there at the airport, with nothing but the clothes on our back, I hear my mother screaming behind me. They made an error in her passport and they told her she couldn't leave.
But she sent George with his little brother and sister to the plane and forced the dad to go too. George's mom did come 6 months later.
Well, suddenly when she's left behind and my dad comes with my brother who was 9, my sister who was 5, and myself, and we went from living a very comfortable life to going hungry literally every day, it didn't take me very long to realize that to me there was no God.
In America, George did great in high school, college, and at the Federal Reserve. Then his first job as an accountant put him with drug dealers.
And I began to open 4 bank accounts for these people to the tune of between $50 to $100 million a month. And I thought I had it made. I was staying clean. So I began to do that for them, and that's where my world drastically changed. And I became U.S. head of all operations for that group that eventually became known as the Medellin Drug Cartel. And we were responsible for importing over 85% of all the cocaine that came into America.
George reveled in the money and the power. He moved in high circles in Washington and partied with Hollywood's famous. His high living was interrupted by a 5-year prison term.
I had all the money in the world, and I realized that you can live just as good in prison as you can outside. You just can't go home.
This photo was taken for his wedding day in prison. He went to jail because the only time he ever flew in a plane hauling cocaine, it crash-landed in Panama. He was double-crossed while bribing officials in Manuel Noriega's government. George Valdes spent 11 years at the top of the cocaine trade in America, importing 30 tons, making billions.
We are good at putting up a nice front that everybody envies. But there comes a time when that front, we don't put that front to ourselves. We look at mirrors and we look inside of us and we realize what a miserable human being we are.
He worried about harming his 3 children. And also he began to see that his drugs caused pain as well as fun. Finally, his 2-year-old daughter innocently spoiled the fast life for George.
And one day my ex-wife dropping off my little baby in the middle of the night, and I was partying with some movie stars, and I wasn't supposed to be visiting with her that weekend, and she just dropped her at the gate. In the middle of the night, she got out of her room and began to knock at my door. And that moment I felt so filthy and dirty like I never had in my life. And that day I made a decision that I couldn't go on anymore, that I had to change.
At age 31, George told the cartel he quit, and they let him. He retired to his Florida ranch to breed horses and be healthy. It would be nice to say he lived happily ever after. But reality is that 3 months later, 5 years after he quit the drug business, George was arrested. Lieutenant Edward Odom of the Alabama Bureau of Investigation followed a trail to George Valdes.
I interviewed him at the U.S. Attorney's office in Mobile, and it was an incredible story.
He earned a college degree in prison, and when released, went to Wheaton College for a master's degree, then earned a Ph.D. from Loyola. He forfeited all the mansions, ranch, jets, boats, money, everything to the government because it all came from drug money. So he began his new life from scratch. George is an occasional adjunct professor at Wheaton. George met his new wife, Sue, at Wheaton.
I get a lot of people ask me, well, how can you marry somebody like that? And I told them I didn't marry that George Valdes. I married somebody who was changed. So if I'm saying I can't marry that person, I'm saying that God couldn't change his life. So, and God did. I mean, if you look at the pictures and see who he was before and you see his now, you can tell his whole presence is a totally new person. So I didn't marry him in his past. I married George Valdes, who he is now.
And be involved in their lives, Little League, school, and everything else. He speaks at over 30 youth rallies every year, all across the country.
He knows that he wants to work with kids throughout the country and bring them a message of hope and redemption. And the greatest time working with George is when he's on stage with at our youth rallies. He can deliver a message that is extremely well received in a way that few people that I've ever known would be able to do so.
John 14:6 says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to God but by me.